Max Ralph here with the Blue White Breakdown presented by Penn Live. The 2025 season is here. Week one is here, and thank God, Max. Thank
Yep.
God.
Yeah,
We've been talking a lot
we have
about
been.
this upcoming season, about what's to come, about we've had our predictions, we've had our thoughts, our projections, our insert preseason and throughout the summer, really.
Mhm.
Thoughts here. But we finally get football.
Yeah,
We're
we do.
back at Beaver Stadium on Saturday. Penn State, Nevada, number two Penn State in the preseason AP Top 25 poll
Mhm.
against Nevada at 3:30 on CBS. Gary Danielson, Brad Nessler on the call for CBS. It'll back up that Texas Ohio State game. I'm sure everyone will be jumping over to Penn State, Nevada after that one. Maybe not the neutrals will, but Penn State fans absolutely will to
Yeah.
get their first glimpse at a team that we think and a lot of other people think will be contending to win the national title this year. But as James Franklin says, Max, it starts with 1-0. It starts with week one. Can't get ahead of our skis. But first of all, as we enter week one, Max, Ralph, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Johnny, for all the reasons you outlined. Very ready for week one. We've got a heck of a slate of games even on this Thursday night tonight.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is, but for those fans who are interested in the Bo Pribula train over at Missouri, the Tigers go tonight. If you're keeping an eye on that, yeah, it's just good. It's just good to be here. I spent all summer. I was not really. Obviously, I was paying attention to Penn State football because it's our job. But as far as NFL goes, as far as just the general feeling of wanting to be in football season, for the most part, I was kind of avoiding it. I was really locking into baseball over the summer, trying to enjoy the off season, and then I got to do my fantasy draft with my home league last weekend, and I did practice drafts for like 2 hours the day before, and I was just like, okay, yeah, we're here. We're here now. Let's do this. Football's here. Penn State plays this weekend. It's time to lock and load, and honestly, it feels pretty good. The fall weather I love. It's just we're in a good spot.
Max, yesterday, and I'm sure it's a little chillier, a little cooler in State College than it is in Philly,
Yeah.
but I guess it was 2 days ago, went outside at like 7 a.m., and there was a crisp in the air. There was a
Yeah.
chill in the air, and I'm just like, let's go.
Yeah.
Like we're so back. Like, I don't get me wrong. I love the summer. The summer is a lot of fun,
Hmm.
but man, we're just back.
Dude,
You
it
know
was
what
in
it
the
is? In The Hangover, when all the guys are in the car and Zach Galifianakis' character is like, "We are back. We're we're, we're, we're back."
we're back. We're
And
all the way
very
back.
very happy to be back.
Yeah, dude, it was in like the 40s the other night here in State College. That was
That's
that was
crazy.
like that was like a little too much. Had to throw an extra blanket on, but
Yeah.
yeah, we're definitely in fall. We can feel it here.
I love it. And look, obviously you mentioned the 40s, the weather. You were outside yesterday, last
Was.
night, Wednesday night, for Penn State's practice availability with the media. And key takeaway from that, Max. And we'll get into Nevada in a second. We'll get into the players we're looking forward to seeing in the season opener. One of the big ones that I know I'm looking forward to watching, and you're looking forward to seeing as well, if the game goes to script and how we think. A game in which Penn State is a 44.5 point favorite. We're expecting to see a handful of backups, more than a handful. And one of them would be the number two quarterback, Max, which
Mhm.
there is some news there, some enlightenment, not necessarily a surprise, I think, at least
No.
from James Franklin, but some news there nonetheless.
No, in no way is it a surprise, but yeah, as you said, Ethan Grunkemeyer has been officially named the number two quarterback for week one. That's kind of the caveat to this thing. James Franklin wanted to ensure that he said, look, this thing was close during the offseason and through fall camp. Both guys have flashed. We just felt Grunk had been a little more consistent ever since the spring, and we're giving him the nod for week one. One of the things that he said to keep an eye on was on their Sunday practices where the vets, the guys who play a lot on Saturday, kind of sit it out. They just watch film, get recover and all that. the 2s, the 3s, the 4s get a lot of action against each other on Sundays. He said Jackson Smolik and Ethan Grunkemeyer are going to get a ton of reps there, and those things could change how this battle goes throughout the year as well. But for now, Ethan Grunkemeyer is the guy, and that's the way it's been tracking for a long time, Johnny. Grunk was a really highly touted quarterback coming in as a freshman last year, and I think that I can remember back to the season opener at West Virginia. You and I were standing on the sidelines in pregame watching warmups, and Penn State was throwing like corner routes on air, just getting ready. And you and I are sitting there kind of looking at each other and going, oh, like Grunkemeyer throws a pretty good ball. Like that looks nice coming out of the hand. So I don't think it's a surprise. Very talented kid. I think he's pretty athletic too. Like, I'm not saying he's Bo Perbula, but he's a little bit of a smaller body than Drew Aller. I think he probably run pretty well if he had to. Jackson Smolik has a future in college football, in my opinion. It could happen this season at Penn State. It could happen next season at Penn State. I think you have to remember that James Franklin saying this battle remains ongoing is probably a little bit of a defense against Smolik portaling. But with that said, what he told us is Ethan Grunkemeyer is the backup for now. We anticipate seeing him this weekend. We'll get into our official game predictions for Nevada soon, before the end of this podcast. But, I anticipate we'll see Grunk. And, I have a lot of high hopes for him.
Yeah, I think we'll see Grunk, and I do think we'll see Jackson Smolik and again, I don't think it's a whole lot of, it is keeping appearances because, like you mentioned, Max, there's the very real possibility that, Ethan Grunkemeyer, who was highly touted coming out of high school, who had all the accolades and, Penn State really loved and saw as a potential future successor to Drew Aller. And that probably would have been the case this year if Drew had left for the NFL draft. I think when, if you're sitting there in 2023 and you have this 5-star in Drew Aller, you're not thinking necessarily that he's going to be at Penn State all 4 years. And I think that there was confidence when they landed Ethan that he could be that guy. And there was obviously they brought in Jackson Smolik too under the same thought of like, hey, he was a 3-star under the radar guy a little bit, at least in his recruiting process, but they saw a lot that they liked. And that continued to be the case when Jackson came back from the injury that he had last year. And James Franklin said multiple times throughout the offseason that, he didn't have any rust in spring ball. He didn't have any rust, obviously, in training camp, but not surprised that Ethan Grunkemeyer is the number 2. I think we'll see both of those guys throughout really this first 3-week. I'm calling it a preseason. Again, I'm sorry, no disrespect to Nevada, FIU, and Villanova, but that's what I'm calling it. I think we're going to see a lot of those two guys play. And I don't think, though, that, say Ethan is just fine and Jackson, looks a little bit better, on Saturday or in the next couple of games. Does that give him the edge? I don't know, because I think they value practice reps a lot.
Yeah.
They especially going against some of the talent that Penn State has. It's better than what, even in their 2, 3 deep, 4 deep, is better than what Nevada, FIU, and Villanova will have. So just something to keep in mind as we kind of look ahead, go throughout this season, that of course the competition is going to be ongoing and it could change. But at the same time, I think if you ask both of us at the start of spring and even after spring, who is Penn State's backup quarterback going to be, I think both of us would have said Ethan Grunkemeyer.
Yeah, and I think, Johnny, one thing that I'm interested in this weekend as well, when you think back to when Drew Aller was the backup, or even last season with Bo as the backup, the chance in these games, assuming everything goes according to plan, for James Franklin and Penn State to get a guy like Grunk in way earlier than a lot of people would be comfortable or would typically have been comfortable with in the past 5 to 10 years of college football. I would not be shocked to see him get a series with the rest of the ones like in the second quarter, or even if it's like the second drive of the third quarter and then he plays the rest of the game. But I would anticipate Grunk can be in there at some point really early on, and especially with the rest of the 1 unit, so that he gets that experience in this situation. They did it with Perbula. They gave Aller a lot of reps when he was backing up Sean Clifford. I think it's the best way to do it with the length of the season, with the few opportunities that guys can really get in the season to develop. And if you can do it in a game where you're winning by as much as you think you might be, you really should go after it. So, and just the other thing about Grunk that I'm really I'm excited to see him in semi-meaningful action where Penn State's not shutting it down, just running the ball, because the only time we saw him in his debut was for 2 series where he threw the ball twice. One was an overthrown interception, which I think you can probably chalk that up to some jitters for his debut. And the other was a completion for 9 yards and a first down, but that was it. The other 6-7 plays he ran were all just handoffs. So really want to see him get out there and throw it. Want to see him have a chance to control the offense, and I think he'll do well.
Yeah, and just to build off of that too, and also just to mention really quick, I think we mentioned at the top, but this is live as always on Thursdays at noon. So if you're watching on YouTube with us, awesome, love it. If you have any questions, comments, anything at all, drop it in the chat and we'll get to it. But something to add on the Grunkemeyer Smolik conversation here as we look to Nevada and we look to even the 2 games beyond that. I don't think Penn State is going to be, when they're in the game, they're not just going to be handing the ball off a million times. Sure, they want to get work for the guys behind Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, which is another storyline going into this game and into the next few games. But James Franklin's going to want to see those guys throw. Like, these reps are valuable, and so I remember end of game situations against West Virginia, against Maryland when Bo was in there, and Penn State's pushing the score now. Part of that might have been, at least in the Maryland case, we've talked about James Franklin's relationship with Maryland in the past, but I do genuinely think a big part of it is, these are valuable reps. These are opportunities for these players to go out there and actually do something and not just go through the motions, because they could do that at practice. Ethan Grunkemeyer knows how to hand the ball off. Jackson Smolik knows how to hand the ball off. Mm-hmm. But having valuable tape and being able to go on Sunday and break down a handful of throws. And so I think when they're in the game, it's not going to be like, hey, let's just run the ball out and get everyone out of here. There might be a semblance or a piece of that, but they're going to have an opportunity to run this offense.
Yeah, Johnny, great news. The listeners they're ready for the season, man. Before we even teased asking for questions and comments, we've got a couple. So let's head to them. I'm going to go to David Demkoski first. I think it will be interesting to see which wide receiver gets the most targets versus Nevada. Will any individual wide receiver get 7 or more targets? Johnny, I'll throw you on the spot here.
Ooh, I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I'm going to say yes, just because I think we will see at least we'll see a full half of Drew Aller, and a big part of this game. And this is actually, goes into our game predictions, Max. So I'll just go into that right now. We have our template for our staff predictions. And one of the subheads is players on the spot, basically players to watch, right, in this game. And for me, I put, hey, this is the first time Penn State fans are really getting a look at Traver Pena, Kyron Hudson, and Devontae Ross. Unless you were at the spring game, at the blue-white game, which was not televised, you didn't see Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross. And Traver Pena had only committed that morning. So this is a real first look at those 3 guys who they added via the transfer portal. And I think that not only is it fan interest, obviously, but, just in terms of getting a rapport and on the same page and translating everything that they've done over the course of the spring and the summer in Pena's case after coming in from Syracuse, that rapport with Aller and getting into a rhythm and getting into a role, I could see Pena getting 7-8 targets. I could see that, and then making it an emphasis of getting those guys on the same page. Tyler Warren no longer here. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Pena. I'll just say I wouldn't be surprised if Pena gets 7 targets.
Yeah, I like that.
That's just my guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think Traver Pena is probably by the end of the season gonna wow us the most out of those 3 that came in. I'm not expecting a ton from Devontae Ross tomorrow, or rather Saturday. I'm jumping the gun a little bit here. I'm not expecting a ton from him. I think he'll probably play a little bit, but as James Franklin said, probably rotate more than they anticipated. So I definitely don't think he'd reach 7. I think Kyron Hudson could get there, but I just think Pena has a little bit more of the I feel like maybe the design may work in his favor a little bit more because of the open field ability that he has. Kyron Hudson strikes me a little more as the security blanket, as the go-to in a tough situation. This could all change as soon as they hit the field, but I like the pick there. I'm going to say no to 7 or more targets, though, just because I think they're going to try and get everyone involved. And we also have to remember just how good Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are. I mean, I think Penn State's not going to have a lot of long sustained drives because I think they're gonna score some long touchdowns this weekend. I just think everybody's going to get involved, and you got to remember there are 3 tight ends that are worth throwing the ball to as well. Just going to be hard to get somebody that many, but if anybody's going to do it, I bet it's Pena. Good question, David. Let's go to Broski Bear, who has a point-specific question. How many points do we need PSU to win by, and how many points do we need to hold Nevada under to not drop in the standings? I mean, that's an interesting thought experiment, Johnny. As the resident AP poll voter, do you think that anything other than, a 2-score win really hurts Penn State's standing?
I think Penn State, and this is just in terms of dropping from maybe 2 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think Penn State could win 100-0, and they could still drop from 2 to 3. And that's just by virtue of what's happening this weekend. You've got Clemson at home against LSU. Clemson's number 4 in the AP poll. They're number 2 on my ballot. And if they beat LSU and look pretty convincing, I wouldn't be surprised if they jump from 4 to 2. And then, of course, you have number 1 Texas, number 3 Ohio State. And I think whichever team wins that game will be number 1, whether it's Texas keeping that top spot and distancing its lead, which was really tight, by the way. Texas and Penn State were separated by 5 points total in the preseason AP Top 25 poll. Whether that's Texas keeping that top spot or Ohio State jumping into that top spot, it's one of those where I, as a voter, always try to keep perspective, right? And I knew when I ranked Clemson behind Penn State that I knew Clemson was playing LSU week 1, right? And I might not necessarily jump Clemson ahead of Penn State, but there are 65 voters in the AP poll, and they might be swayed by just one game. And so Penn State really it's nothing to be concerned over if they were to drop from 2 to 3 or whatever, because you've also got 3 weeks of kind of nothingness for Penn State until they play Oregon. So I wouldn't be surprised if they move off that number 2 and down a spot or 2 before the Oregon game. But ultimately they'll be all right, even if they do.
Yeah. I would say if there were odds on it, I would take the bet that Penn State finishes the first 3 weeks of the season lower than number 3 over the chances of them, number 2 is what I meant, over the chances of Penn State being number 2 or number 1 at the end of these 3 weeks.
I would agree with that.
And the other thing with the specifics on, scoring versus allowing points against Nevada, I would kind of hope that the other AP voters, your colleagues, Johnny, would understand that, look, this is week 1 in a brand new defense. Unless we have a Bowling Green situation where they just look completely lost in the first half, a few points should not be a concern. There's a lot that goes into this. I would not be concerned if anything less than 20-17 from Nevada is what happens. If it's more than 20, that's maybe when alarm bells would start going off. But this team is also, as if we continue to get into our predictions a little bit more in depth, this team just has so much that we don't really know about it because it has 54 new faces on the roster. I think it's something like 30 transfers and 24 freshmen. I don't know the exact numbers. It's not the same team that it was last year. So hard to predict. And Penn State's coming into the year with the new defense. So I understand the question 100%. I think chances are at the end of the 3 weeks, Penn State's probably lower than number 2. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, this Nevada team was 3-10 last year. And like you mentioned, how many players they brought in. I mean, that could go better. That could go worse. There's a chance that none of these players hit and they're really bad. I'm thinking this year will be more. This game will be more last year's Kent State, which was 56-0, than it was Bowling Green. But if it is Bowling Green, then at least voters in terms of the poll would have some kind of reason, like Penn State specific reason, to hit the pause button a little bit on the hype train. But I just think the early season, the week one matchups that we're all really excited to watch, even Notre Dame at Miami. Like if Notre Dame goes in and blows out Miami, that could swing the polls a little bit too.
Yeah.
The margins were not only tight at the top, but they were tight throughout, which leads me to believe that there were I think 7 different teams with at least one first place vote in the preseason top 25. So a lot of these pollsters have these teams really tight, and a big week one performance by one of them or 2 of them or 3 of them, could see Penn State go down in the poll, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world either.
Yeah, Johnny, the comments are popping. I'm loving this. Let's go to Mike Fenstermaker, who says, will Penn State score a special teams TD, and by who? This is a fascinating question to me because the special teams unit is intriguing because Nick Singleton is back as a kick returner. We expect King Mack to take some returns back there as well, who was at Penn State, went to Alabama, now back at Penn State, will play at safety. And then punt returning really was quite bad last year. I don't think it's a thing that a lot of people noticed, but as we're sitting in the press box watching games, I can remember you and I over and over talking about how this is actually a problem. Like they're not getting good starting field position because they're not returning punts well. And so that should be improved because Zion Tracy's back for another year. Trevor Pena has experience doing it. Devontae Ross could do it. Tyseer Denmark could do it. I think it's a possibility. Do you think there's a special teams touchdown on Saturday?
I think it's a possibility, but at the same time too, if Nick is back there returning kicks, is he just going to kneel it and not risk an injury against Nevada, and just wait for the bigger games? So I'm going to say no to a special teams touchdown. But if it happens, my guess is not a return, but like a blocked punt return.
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
That's kind of where my head was at too. But the only thing I'd say to that is
Nevada's going to be punting a lot. Nevada will be punting a lot. So there are a lot of opportunities for that.
My only wonder with that though, Johnny, and my concern, because that's kind of where my head went as well. But I just wonder if Justin Lustig would really want to put on like his best punt block against a team like Nevada when, you could save that and not put it on film against a team like Oregon or Ohio State later in the season. But I do think that is probably the most likely way that it happens. I would say number 2 is a punt return touchdown from Zion Tracy. Number 3 is a kick return touchdown from Nick Singleton. However, I'm going to go with no on the special teams touchdown as well. Chris Campbell predicts at least one running, passing, defensive, and special teams touchdown on Saturday. Wow. Boy, that's big time. Johnny, who's getting a defensive touchdown if it happens?
Elliott Washington.
Great
Washington, pick 6. Undercuts the route, takes it the other way, untouched.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to go with Colin Dinkins in some rotational action at the nickel spot. I think he and Kenny Woosley, both of them, are guys who are not getting a whole lot of talk, but are players who are going to contribute at nickel, especially when, the rotations are going to run pretty deep this weekend. I like Colin Dinkins. I think he's a better player than a lot of people give him credit for.
What's the commenter's name again, though? Who was that?
Chris Campbell.
All right, Chris. So if they get a special teams and a defensive touchdown, then I don't know. Maybe we welcome him onto the show to collect his award because that's a call. I
love that. Yeah. We'll get his take on the FIU game next week.
Yeah, exactly.
How's that sound, Chris? I hope you like that idea. So let's see. I think those are the questions for now. So let's get into some scores here, Johnny. Let's see what you, me, Bob Flounders, and Joe Hermit had on the docket for the game this weekend. The point spread is massive. 44.5 points is gigantic. And I have been saying it ever since Bob mentioned it 2 weeks ago to me. I don't think Penn State will cover that point spread. I think they're way better than Nevada. but I am the only one of our group that had Penn State not covering that point spread. So let's get into it. Chubba Purdy, I think, is the guy who probably, if anything, poses a threat from Nevada. So wide receiver Marcus Bellin, who's interesting, running back who transferred in from Utah State, who I think averaged 5.1 yards a carry last year. There's some intriguing players on this offense, but the team just was not that good last year. They did lose 5 games by 5 points or fewer. Jeff Choate in his second year, interesting coach, has some experience at high-level programs. I just think that this team is not going to be great, but I think they'll have a little more fight than maybe everybody's expecting. Johnny, what do you have your eye on here?
Yeah, I mean, Purdy would probably be the only kind of X factor, if you want to call it, in terms of, and again, this is all relative. We're talking about whether or not Nevada scores a touchdown. I
Right.
think Purdy previously at Florida State, Nebraska, the quarterback who transfers in to Nevada, so he has some kind of pedigree, but at the same time, like I still see this as an opportunity for Penn State's defense to tee off. I don't have Nevada scoring a point in this game.
Yeah.
And I just think it's one of those where we're gonna see, the Chaz Colemans, the Kemba Jews, all those younger players, Darius Dixon's, like the gap in talent between, Penn State's second, third string and Nevada's, ones, I think are still going to be pretty stark. So yeah, I don't have Nevada scoring. I've got Penn State 49-0. So that is covering the 44.5. Now, would I be stunned if it's 42-0, like, or 45-6? Like, no, I wouldn't be. It's such a big spread. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a game
Exactly.
that Penn State is going to win comfortably. It's just a matter of like what that score is going to look like. But I do think that, and as I mentioned earlier, the want and really the need to get Ethan Grunkemeyer and Jackson Smollett some like real play and have them throw the ball, I think could lead to, not a super late that's going to be causing headlines or anything, but like a fourth quarter touchdown by Penn State to put them over the top on the spread.
Yeah, by no means do I think Penn State will like fully throttle it down, by the end of this, but I don't know. It's just so many points. Let's go toward what Bob Flounders and Joe Herman said before I finish up with my official prediction. We do our players on the spot. Don't be surprised if prediction. I'm gonna give what Bob had here. He says no one is on the spot when you are favored by more than 6 touchdowns, which in classic Bob fashion, that's hilarious. He says depth on the D-line, running backs, and quarterbacks need to step up here, and obviously that's the case. His don't be surprised was if the first touchdown is a lengthy pass, as James Franklin tries to show off the new receivers he added. His prediction is 55-6, which covers the 44.5. Down to Joe Hermit, our photographer extraordinaire. He has some players on the spot for the front seven, for Nevada's front seven, that is, trying to handle Nick Singleton and Katron Allen with an offensive line that he thinks is the best in a long, long time for Penn State, which obviously we agree with him there. Don't be surprised if Penn State's defense pitches a shutout, forcing multiple turnovers. He has Penn State 48, Nevada nothing. Johnny, any thoughts there?
No, I'm kind of locked in with that shutout because I kind of see the same thing happening. I love Bob's players on the spot, right?
Yeah.
No one's on the spot when you're favored by 6 touchdowns. Like I mentioned earlier in the pod, my players on the spot. Again, we're just the receivers in terms of building on the rapport and the relationship that they've built with Drew Aller, over the course of the offseason. My don't be surprised if we see up to 80 different players for Penn State on offense and defense.
Yeah.
In last year's, like I mentioned earlier, that 56-0 win over Kent State last year, Penn State played 77 players, 31 on offense, 36 on defense. And again, James Franklin likes to get these young guys some run in these kind of games early in the season. And I predicted touchdowns specifically from Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Trevor Pena, and Khalil Dinkins. I think after an offseason of James Franklin declaring him his guy who no one talks about enough, that Khalil Dinkins finds the end zone, and then the backup running backs kind of take it from there, and maybe we see Martin or Smith or one or two of those guys find the end zone as well.
Yeah, in a game where Penn State should really be able to have its way, I think James Franklin and Andy Kotelnicki both will at least try to be a little targeted in who gets the touchdowns and who gets the yards. Khalil Dinkins is a great pick. So for my prediction, I have players on the spot. And this is something that in a game like this, you have to be intentional about where you can find value. And I think it's on the defensive line for Penn State because Chubba Purdy, like you said, a little bit of pedigree, doesn't have a ton of impressive stuff on his resume despite being at big schools, but he can run a little bit. He's got some dual threat to him. And when Penn State has a defensive line that features a bunch of guys who either haven't played in college football yet or have barely played, I think it can present a little bit of a test to be, sharp on your responsibilities, to be good in your gaps, to make sure you're taking the quarterback on every play if you have to. So I'm looking at Chaz Coleman, Yvonne Kemaju, Xavier Gilliam, even a Malachi Williams, a Jalen Harvey. Those guys are like the second and third strings this year, and they're going to play a lot. We have to see what they have. And this is a good test for them against a quarterback that can at least cause a little bit of issue on the running front here. I don't be surprised if Nick Singleton breaks a long touchdown in the first quarter. He spent all season talking about how much he's been working on making a miss. He said that's been a big thing with Stan Drayton coming in his first year. I believe him. Dude's fast. If he's even better at breaking the second level of a safety or a linebacker, look out. But my score, 52-10. So I actually have Penn State scoring a little more than all of you except for Bob, but I'm giving Nevada a couple of points, maybe a field goal in the first half and a touchdown against the rotators in the second half. And that's why I end up going under the spread of 44.5.
You're a big Wolfpack guy.
I'm a huge Wolfpack guy. Look, the only thing, it's so hard to anticipate any carryover from last season to this season with a low-level team like this that is just ravaged and rebuilt by the transfer portal. But there were a few things last year, especially offensively, that made you think there's some signs of life. I'm pulling up the stats here. They were really good on third downs last year. 44.6% on third down, and they were great in the red zone as well. 89.5% conversion in the red zone. Will they even get to the red zone against Penn State? It might not happen, but if there's a fluke turnover against Grunk or Smolik or there are just so many things that can go wrong for Penn State that leads to a score like this that I'm banking on it happening. And like I said before, in week one, new DC, a lot of new players. I'm not going over 44.5 points. It's massive. And I'm fine if I'm wrong, but I'm glad I'm the contrarian among our staff because we got to have some variability, right?
Yeah, really going out on a limb that they want.
I know. It's huge, but for Johnny, for as much as we talk about betting, I feel like somebody's got to be different, Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, by the way, just a quick plug. I had my picks against the spread go up on PennLive.com yesterday on Wednesday. That's going to be a regular weekly feature of just kind of picking, the three biggest games of the college football weekend, and then also just a few kind of sicko wild cards in there. I think I picked Miami of Ohio to cover 17.5 against Wisconsin, which is tonight, I believe, not 9 o'clock. Along with some other ones, Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Clemson. I like the under in that. So check that out if you haven't already. And, obviously when Penn State plays, Oregon, Ohio State, even Iowa, they'll be featured in that as well. But we'll be, having our game by game predictions going up every Thursday morning. Thursday morning, right, Max? Thursday morning?
Yep. That's absolutely right. They're on the website right now. You can check them out before we do these live shows. If you're a real Penn Live sicko and you want to read about them and then hear about them, and we love that. I love it.
Pick them, read them in the morning, come on the live show, and then tell us why we're going to be wrong.
That's exactly right. That's why we're doing this. That is precisely why. For the most part, we love the interaction. Just a reminder as we start to wind down here, we are live. Questions, comments, predictions, drop them in the chat. We'll get to them. To finish up our conversation from earlier, David Demkoski says he's going with Dom DeLuca for a defensive touchdown, says the ball finds him. Absolutely true. Same could be said for Zachy Wheatley. Those two are they just have a nose for the ball. Sometimes it's unexplainable. Johnny, one more thing that I wanted to hit on. I posted a story this morning. As you mentioned, a series with betting. I'm starting a series for this season. We'll see how it goes, where I'm identifying a few trending players each week for Penn State, calling it the stock watch, who's up, who's down. I'm going to present you my choices, let you analyze, and then I'll give my own reasoning. My two ups this week were Antoine Belgrave-Shorter and Ethan Grunkemeyer. Pretty easy choices as we have some depth chart conversations, going around. My two downs this week were Zariah Fisher and Javen Williams.
Why down on Zariah Fisher?
So because we did not see Zariah at practice on Wednesday, and it sounds like he had something banged up in camp that is going to slow him down a little bit. If he doesn't play this weekend, I don't know when the timeline is for him. And I just think it's in the context of all offseason, us assuming that he was going to be the starter opposite Deni Dennis Sutton. And so if he's not able to participate in week one, and depending on how the showing goes for Chaz Coleman, Jalen Harvey, Malachi Williams, Yvonne Kamaju, I still haven't figured out exactly how to say his name perfectly. But I just think I'm still high on Zariah Fisher once he gets healthy. But for now, it's trending in the wrong direction just because not sure we're going to see him. And there's too many other guys that we're looking to see.
More than fair. I like the Antoine Belgrave-Shorter pick. That was actually what I was about to say when you were saying how the ball finds Zachy Wheatley. And by the way, the Dom DeLuca pick for a pick six or a scoop and score, like, you're right. I mean, the ball does just find that guy's hands, and he's going to be on the field. Interested to see, how Jim Knowles deploys his linebackers as a greater point to DeLuca and the linebackers with Tony Rojas, Amari Campbell transferring in from North Carolina. Very intrigued to see how that all plays out. Again, not just this weekend, but in the weekends to come. But Antoine Belgrave-Shorter is a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if we see him get a takeaway. And I've mentioned this in the past, but I still remember that Auburn game where Zachy was all over the ball and Jalen Reed is two young safeties, two young players at that time who were kind of breaking through and had a really good summer. I think it would be kind of fitting almost if after winning the starting job coming out of training camp, if Antoine Belgrave-Shorter got a turnover, whether that's forcing a fumble and someone else lands on it like that, I'm still crediting him.
Oh yeah, that absolutely counts. Yeah. I think, we learned a lot about the depth chart this week. Bob and I went over it in the first podcast on Monday. We've had stories all over Penn Live about it, but just among all of the names that we heard about, Belgrave-Shorter's was kind of the most surprising at the safety spot. So that's why I gave him the nod for the trending upward. He switched from corner to safety just last fall. And so it's really been a pretty rapid adaptation to that spot. I just think, physically he looks good. He's athletic. He's been impressive in practice and what we've seen so far. So I like the pick there. Grunk, that one, we already talked about him. That one's cut and dry. He's the number 2 QB this week. He won the job. And then Javen Williams, just to wrap it up, the reason I had him down, similarly, James Franklin said Wednesday night that he's dealing with some bumps and bruises. So that contributed. But even before we really knew that was the case, I had him going down because he was another buzzy name in the spring with Rucci and Donko not practicing at right tackle. Javen started to get some praise over playing there, got some great reps, and we heard that he was doing good things. Get to the fall, and while he's going to be an important depth piece, in this piece, I made sure to preface everything by saying, we're going to see Javen Williams eventually this season, but he didn't make it in that top group of 7 guys that James Franklin named this week, and I think he was a name that we probably expected to be among the 7 or 8. Maybe he's number 8 when he's healthy, but he was not one of the guys that they deem as starters right now. So talented kid who's going to play eventually, but just felt like the arrow was pointing down a little bit based on what we heard all offseason.
Yeah, a guy who got some work, like you mentioned, at tackle with Rucci and Donko nursing those injuries in the spring. Guy who, throughout this summer was working at guard. And I talked to Phil Troutline and Javen Williams back on media day on, in early August, first weekend of August. And there was some optimism around him and around what he was going to be able to provide to
Yeah.
this team, even not in a starter role. But he's a former 5-star from Wyoming, now third year at Penn State, didn't enter the transfer portal,
Hmm.
has accepted, his role and just kind of the understanding that he has to be patient,
Yeah.
especially in pass protection and growing in that area after coming from a run first system in high school. So unfortunately, to have these bumps and bruises right before the season, not what you
Yeah.
want. But at the same time, if it's a minor deal, you would want them now as opposed to later, in the Big Ten slate.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, just want to make sure, like, I think it's going to happen for Javen
Yeah.
at Penn State. I just, right now, like I said, based on what we've been hearing in the offseason, I think going into the Nevada game, just, a little bit pointing down. Two comments that I want to get to before we wrap this thing up. David Demkoski again. Cooper Cousins has to be breathing fire this week. He wants to be a starter. Absolutely. But I also think that Coop is as much of a team first guy as there is on this roster, in my opinion. Really good kid. And really, he's in that group of 7 that Penn State, they're going to play all of them a lot. I don't, even if he's not with the first group that runs out there, he's going to play 20 to 40 snaps in a typical game of action, in my opinion. James Franklin keeps saying how they could run 6-man or 7-man sets to get all of those guys out there. So, even if he's not out there with the first group, he's kind of still a starter.
Yeah. No, agreed. I mean, and just to piggyback on the idea of him being a team first guy, like he carries himself like a veteran. That's something that it was one of the biggest takeaways for me from talking to the assistant coaches back in June and having a conversation with Phil Troutline about Cooper and about his mentality and how he's going to help this team, both as a player on the field and in the locker room as well.
Yeah. All right. One more. Philip, I'm sorry if I say your last name wrong. Bujeski. That's what I'm going to go with. How about newly injured wide receiver Josiah Brown? Was he going to get much playing time regardless? Yeah. So if you missed it, I had a post up on Penn Live Tuesday night about Josiah Brown has an injury that we expect to keep him out for a significant amount of time. I don't think he was going to be among like the 2 deep. We figured out who that 2 deep was this week with Pena, Ross Hudson, Clifford, Denmark, and Kobe Howard, the freshman. But I do think he might have been in the 3 deep at those positions. I think he's a guy who they liked, there's a reason why they recruited him. But he had another injury in his senior year of high school, slowed his development once he got to campus. And based on what I've heard, it was like this fall is when things started to kind of click for him and that the game started to slow down. And so it's just kind of really rough timing for him to have another injury like this. So I don't necessarily think that we're going to see him a lot, but I think you probably could have gotten on the field here and there.
Yeah, and just one other thing to add to that, because I agree wholeheartedly. It's just not what you want, even just for the wide receiver room in general.
Yeah.
Even if he wasn't going to be in that top 6, which we didn't expect him to be, but you have Josiah Brown now out for an extended period of time on top of Caden Saunders out as well. And so to have those 2 guys who, they weren't going to be in the top 5 or 6 in terms of targets on this team, still quality depth pieces, still guys who could provide you something, even if not now, later in the season, because injuries to other guys could happen as well, right?
Yeah.
Just not what you want for the wide receiver room, but also not a reason to panic.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Z-Man says PSU 55, Nevada 3. That's right around where Bob had him. Broski Bear 54-9. And then Z-Man also says Chaz Coleman gets 2 sacks on Saturday. I could see it. That'd be pretty big time. We would have lots of stories coming out about that kid if that's what happens, because that would
I was gonna say, like, Chaz Coleman getting 2 sacks would be great. Antoine Belgrave Shorter getting a pick would be great, right? For us, It would make our jobs so easy. just
Yeah.
right after the game, writing about the freshman phenom defensive end that's going to tear it up, and that and help this room that lost Max Granville and
Yeah.
lost Abdul Carter to the NFL and Amin Vanover to NCAA waiver. Like, that would make our lives so easy. That would make our lives very easy if Antoine Belgrave Shorter wanted to have a house call, because then we could write about him breaking out.
Yeah.
Any very easy way to write about this opener that we both predict will be a relative snooze fest.
Yep.
Would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I already said Broski Bear 54-9 in favor of Penn State. 9's an interesting number. 3 field goals. I don't know. Let's put it this way. If Jeff Choate is kicking 3 field goals, that's sad, man. And no offense to your prediction, Broski Bear, but Nevada's gotta go for it on 4th down. You got to score. You got to score. Z-Man, yeah, Chaz Coleman's supposed to get 30 snaps or so. Yeah, that's what James Franklin said last night. We expect him to play a ton. 2 sacks would be cool. One name that I just want to put out there that I don't think anybody's really mentioned, that I don't want to not mention, is Amari Campbell. He's going to be the Mike. He's going to play a lot of snaps early on, and he's wearing the green dot every time he's on the field. So very curious to watch him. Thomas Holslander, a late comment as we were gonna wrap up here. Has anyone seen scholarship QB4 at any fall practice? Yeah, we've seen Beckham Kritz out there a few times at camp. Look, just to be blunt, he's not close. He's just not there yet. Talented arm, like a frame that if he grows into it, could figure it out. But accuracy needs to step up. Needs to get a little bit bigger physically. It's going to take some time, and that was kind of the expectation when he enrolled and signed. But certainly some at least promise there. The staff sees stuff in Beckham. Actually, it's Kritza, which I noticed in the game notes this week. It's Kritza. So yeah, we have seen him. We saw him earlier in camp. But either way, project piece there. And then Mike Fenstermaker, we could end up with a safety. Nevada will have poor field position most of the day. Now that's a call too. I don't know. That was kind of that's kind of hedging your bet there by saying we could have a safety. You should have just said there's going to be a safety, Mike. I would have appreciated the boldness. I'm not going with a safety just because they're so rare. But I like 52-10 this game. There's just a lot about this team that we still need to learn, I think. So even if it's a relative snooze fest, I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and just one more point, and I don't mean to open a different can of worms or a whole bigger conversation, because this could be a topic 4 months from now. But the question about Beckham, Kritza now, not Kritza, Kritza.
Yeah.
The question about Beckham kind of made this pop into my mind, because I thought about it last night when they named Ethan at least temporarily, the number 2. Penn State could find itself in a situation after this season where they might take their first transfer scholarship quarterback of the James Franklin era, because what I'm about to lay out could very well happen. Obviously, Drew Aller is off to the NFL. He's done after this season.
Mm-hmm.
Ethan is kind of the clear-cut successor. Jackson Smolik maybe enters the portal and tries to be a starter elsewhere. They could decide that Beckham and then, Troy, the 2026 the 2026 recruit, that neither of those guys would be ready to be the backup. And then Penn State actually goes out and gets a scholarship quarterback in the transfer portal, which James Franklin has not done in his tenure, or at least in this transfer portal era. So just some food for thought. And as we look ahead to the 2025 opener, I'm already thinking about the portal and the offseason. So there you go.
It's a vicious cycle, Johnny. My only thing that I know we've mentioned this before on a podcast, it's hard to convince somebody to come in to be a backup quarterback. If you're confident Gronk's the guy, I mean, you can frame it and say it's going to be a competition throughout the offseason. But even still, if a guy's in the portal and sees somebody like Gronk, who is at least in some capacity expected to be the starter, it's tough to convince a guy to come for that, especially at that position. But yeah, guys, we had a great crowd today. This was a lot of fun. Yeah, we love the interactions. We're going to do this every Thursday during the season. We can do this over and over. We pick out all of our bold predictions. I love it. We'll have our official score predictions every week. And yeah, lots to learn this weekend. We'll be talking all about it over the weekend on Monday next week. And yeah, it's finally here, Johnny. It's finally here.
I can't wait, and very interested to see what the temporary press box is like, and then the viewpoint from the other side of the field. So yeah, I'm just very interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, gonna be a fun opener for sure. Make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed on Penn Live. Make sure you're reading everything we have. Go check out other podcasts if you miss them. We appreciate your support, even if you're watching recorded. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you take care.